Today's episode is brought to you by Create Engage, the digital marketing agency for the disruptive management consultancy. Digital marketing has moved forwards, but most consulting firms haven't. Many consulting firms still see their corporate blog as their sole digital marketing channel and find themselves frustrated when these blogs yield little, if any, results. For those consultancies that understand digital marketing, though, it can be a huge asset and help them achieve rapid business growth. In fact, at Create Engage, we've recently written a case study of one successful consulting firm that used digital marketing to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years. Having spent countless hours researching consulting firms and consulting leaders for this podcast, it became very clear that while some firms do digital marketing well, the vast majority of consulting firms struggle to leverage its power and don't know where to start. To help those of you who want to harness the power of digital marketing to grow your consulting business, but don't have the knowledge, capacity, or in-house capability to do so, I launched Create Engage, the first digital marketing agency for the management consulting industry. As former consultants ourselves, we understand the challenges that you face when it comes to delivering effective digital marketing that engages prospective clients and generates leads. Having worked in the industry, we understand consulting buyers, what resonates with them and what doesn't. This enables us to harness the latest in digital marketing in a way that aligns with your brand and your market positioning to attract the prospective clients that you're looking to target. We understand that each consultancy is unique and have a range of services to help you shape, implement, and sustain effective digital marketing strategies that deliver results, regardless of where you are on your digital marketing journey. If you would like to find out more about how Create Engage can help you use digital marketing to take your business to the next level, then send me an email at nick@createengage.co.uk or go to our website, createengage.co.uk, where you can download that free case study that breaks down the digital marketing strategies used by one successful consulting firm to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years and gives you the secrets they used so that you can apply them in your own firm. If you want to outpace your competitors and stand out in the crowded consulting market, then get in touch. We'd love to help you grow your business through digital marketing. Hi, and welcome to Climbing Consulting. In today's episode, I speak to Dean Taylor, CEO at IMD Group, the specialist digital transformation and training consultancy focused on delivering complex change in the secure and public sector environments. Dean's story is rather unique and one that I'm sure will resonate with a lot of you listening. Unlike many of my previous guests who have started their own consulting businesses in their late 20s or early 30s, Dean started his entrepreneurial journey later in life. Having already held senior roles in both government and consulting, he decided to strike out on his own and launch IMD Group, a business which he has grown into a team of over 140 in just 6 years. Since being introduced by our mutual friend Ben Chapple at Circle Performance, Dean and I have got to know each other really well, and it was great to have a chance to speak to him for the podcast and share his journey and his insights with you. We cover a lot in this one and go into detail on a whole host of topics, including Dean's journey with IMD and how he turned it from a failing training business into the 16 million consulting firm it is today. Dean's take on leading a business through lockdown and his advice for others on how to support your team through difficult times like these, and Dean's perspective on learning and development for both consulting leaders and military leavers to help you both give the best to your team as well as to get the best from them. I really enjoyed catching up with Dean for this interview. Pre-lockdown, we had planned to do this conversation at my kitchen table over a beer. And while sadly we had to have this conversation remotely, it didn't affect the great insights and stories that Dean was able to share. Whether you are running a consulting business or you are listening to this podcast as a military leaver looking to get into consulting, I know you are really going to enjoy this one. So, with the intro over, all that's left to say is sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Dean Taylor. Dean, welcome to the show.
Nick, great to see you. How are you?
I'm very good. As we said sort of last week, it feels a bit strange given you live down the road from me that we're having to do this virtually, but That is the times we live in, isn't it, Dean? So we are doing a virtual interview. I know we were planning to do this at my kitchen table, but safety first. I'm really pleased we can still do it. And given everything I know about you, I'm really keen to share that with my audience, but also really keen to dig into the things I don't. So thank you for making the time for this.
You're very welcome. Very welcome, Nick. And I know the time will come when we can have a beer and watch a bit of rugby and talk afterwards. But really, thank you for speaking to me tonight.
Not at all. Well, and yeah, one day soon, I can see the Bath shirt behind you. I know we're both avid rugby fans, and yeah, it feels a real shame when you see the wreck on telly with no one in. It feels a real waste. So hopefully not long, Dean. And yeah, we will be back to it. We obviously know each other, but for those who don't, it'd be great if you could just share for my audience a bit of your background and really how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think for me, I probably like to start off with the beginning, and that's really down to my parents. Really, I look back, and my dad was very, very hard working. He worked in a big factory and was always the one that everybody went to load their machines. And my mum was very outgoing, and naturally, I met lots of her friends, and at an early age was encouraged really to speak to adults, etc. So I think the early days for me were quite important. And then through school, I'm really into sport and particularly team sport. And as I'll probably talk about later on that, it's been a big factor in my life and continues to be. But let's talk about, career. So early foundation, really good. Career, well, I must say I've been very lucky, and I've been very, very lucky in my career, Nick, and I'll almost say I've enjoyed every minute of it. So early days, I worked for the government, particularly in IT programs, helping them really, probably early digital transformation, really, making IT make their working practices better. Love that, really enjoyed it. But I also realised that whilst I enjoy technology, I really love people. And that's really been the centre point of my career. Is I'm a people person, as lots of people refer to me. So, yeah, I picked up the way government works, but I thought I need to explore this people side of me and how best to do it. So I was very lucky. I had a really good boss in the government, and they gave me an internal job consulting within the department, and that was it. I thought, this is for me. So civil service, fantastic career, but I needed to try public sector. So where to go? I had some friends that worked in management consulting. What was that? I said. So, a few beers with some friends. And yeah, I ended up joining a company called Admiral Management Services. Fantastic organisation. I really learned a lot of my trade there, right from how consultancy works, how to bid for work, how to sell. I really did learn my trade. I worked with some really good senior consultants who taught me what I know now, from the sort of face-to-face side, mentoring and coaching. So that was great. But I looked at all the flash cars in the car park and thought, these guys, who are these guys with the lovely cars? Happen to be the sales staff and not the consultants. So sales came into my head, but unfortunately the organisation I was with, now called CGI, was quite large, and I didn't really get the opportunity to try out sales. So I looked around and found a small business called Vega Consulting. At an interview, I was quite to the point that, whilst I enjoy consulting, I really like to try sales. So lo and behold, I joined, and the first 6 months I was consulting, but then they realised I could sell more, and I was selling more than the sales guy, and they gave me the opportunity to move into sales. And the rest, that was the launch of my career, really, Nick. I said to you before, for me, I'm very people-focused, very people-driven. So the chance to talk to people and get paid for it was great. So I moved up through the management team in Vega Consulting. Really enjoyed it. Worked on some really interesting projects in government and outside, European Space Agency, NHS. But then we got bought by a large company. And again, I think after my time with CGI, I realised that I'm not really a fan of large companies. Everybody to their own. I like a small organisation where you can make a difference. Everybody knows each other, and you get that camaraderie. So, again, an old contact of mine was on the board at BMT, and interestingly, being a Bathonian, I'd never worked in Bath, so I took a job with BMT, which was fantastic, great organisation. as on the board as a BD director, really grew that business. We had a great team ethic there. I had a great managing director and loved it. And then, I decided to move on, and here I am now, CEO of a company that I started with an investor, and the rest is history.
Fantastic, dude. Well, and just before I sort of dive into the backstory, because there's quite a few things in there that I certainly didn't know and I'd love to find out about. Again, just for anyone listening, you're quite a modest chap, so I'm keen to sort of shout about it. IMD, how big are you as an organisation now, just for anyone who's listening?
Yeah, we started in late 2015, but we didn't really start the consulting business until 2016. So, yeah, we're going to hit about 16 million turnover this year. We've got 140 people working on various projects, some of those within government, a strategic partner, but all in technology. So quite a journey, really. It's been a startup. So in sort of 4 years, we've, and now into our 5th year, we've grown quite fast, sustainably. And quite fast. And I think one of the big things that, was the change for me was getting private equity backed in 2019. That's been a fundamental change. And plans forward, I'd like to take the business to about 30 million by 2023, perhaps look at some more investment and take it on further.
Wow. Well, I think, amazing vision, and that's a phenomenal growth rate in just that sort of short 4 or 5 year period. And we'll talk about actually how you've done that, Dean, because again, I doubt it's been luck and probably a lot of hard work that's got into that. I was quite interested because it's something in your journey I didn't know about, what you just said there around sort of the move from public sector into consulting, but then also into sales. And actually, I'd be keen to hear about both of those points. I think if I characterize, you've made some big jumps, from the public sector, which is very structured, very hierarchical, into consulting that's, very entrepreneurial and much more flexible. But then also you've gone from delivery to sales. And how did you approach each of those steps? Was it sort of more coincidental? You saw what was around you and you moved to that next stage when it felt right for you? Was it something you had more of a sort of defined path about? I'm just keen for anyone who maybe is in, say, a public sector role right now thinking about what to do next. Sort of what were some of those things that led you to say, actually, consulting is where I want to take that career next, and not just stay, as you say, sort of doing that project management, that digital change within the government?
I think I was quite lucky inherently. I've always been managed to sell and probably build relationships. Let's talk about selling. Selling's got 3 elements. The biggest one is relationship building. That's a tick in the box. The second one is understanding sort of process and sales and how that works. And the third one is knowing your product. I think the most difficult one to learn is relationship building. So I think through sport and, doing lots of things as a youngster, lots of activities, I learned how to relationship build and probably motivate people and get along with people. And that's been fundamental in my career. So I think the time in the civil service, I learned the sort of technical element and some process around how government functions, how to speak to senior leaders. So that sort of piece I undertook. So going across consulting, I already had the technology expertise, the process expertise, and also what you need for consulting is ability to build relationships. So probably 2 things there, Nick. So all I really needed to learn to jump into sales was to sell the product. And being a consultant, you understand the product you're selling. So that's my journey, really. And it was a joke about the cars. It was just something a few people said to me, even when I was in the civil service, you really need to be selling. However, selling comes with risks. And if you're poor, you go. And that's the way that selling is quite cutthroat, but it's very, very rewarding career. And as I said earlier, I feel very lucky in that I'm paid to talk to people, and it's like a footballer who gets paid to play his favourite thing. I get paid to do my favourite thing.
I love that, Dean. And I think, mate, we've talked before, just you and I sort of privately, and I'd love to hear it from yourself again for the show, is around actually starting IMD Group. Because you mentioned there that it felt very natural having been at BMT. I've spoken to a lot of consulting entrepreneurs for the show who have started their businesses, frankly, at similar places to myself. I launched my business a couple of years ago. It's just myself, my wife. We've got limited outgoings. If I don't make a lot of money for a year, that's not a problem. And a lot of people I speak to have been in that similar boat. I think something that really struck me with your story is you had a very successful career at BMT. Like you said, you were on the board and you left at a point when you had, family, you had responsibilities, you had outgoings. And I'd love to hear in your own words that time of your life and almost what was it that made you think, right, I want to go out and launch my own thing? And particularly any of those questions you may have asked yourself or spoken with your wife about to get yourself comfortable. I'd love to hear your advice based on your own story and how you came to the decision that it was right for you.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I did take risks. I was 47 at the time, had quite a large mortgage, 2 children. But equally, I was in a very, very high paid job. So lots to think about. I think experience-wise, I was very confident in my ability to sell. So that was one thing that I had on my mind, probably the biggest thing really. And even though I really enjoyed my time at BMT, I was ready to move. A big company, as I said before, I like working at Vega and again at BMT. I worked with 2 small consultancies and grew them, was part of that, found that a real buzz and exciting. So I knew my stuff. I had lots of contacts. And again, through helping people, over the years, not because I wanted a return, just because it was the right thing to do. Those people were suddenly around me and wanting to help me. So, yeah, I remortgaged my house. I took a considerable pay cut. I took a big risk and I went for it. And I think the key thing, talking about, conversations with people, particularly my wife, I sat down with her first of all and said, look, I really want to do this. I felt as though I was churning at BMT. I got the company to a great place. And where next? So I thought, I need a challenge, Nick, I really do. So you probably say, what a silly challenge. But so I sat down with my wife and said, look, I'd really like to do this. What do you think? And she said, look, go for it. You know your stuff. Worst comes to the worst, you're going to get another job in sales. And you've had a go and just go for it. And that was key for me. I really wanted her backing. And I think your point to anybody else at 47 or older, it's never too late. You're very experienced then. Yes, I took a risk, and maybe that's the entrepreneurial piece in me. But again, if I look back at 47, I knew a lot. So I'd seen the mistakes that some entrepreneurs make that maybe start younger, and I'd seen those. I'd seen companies being bought and integrated. I'd seen a lot. So I think it was a risk, but it was a balanced risk. Do I wish I'd done this when I was 27? The answer is yes, but only because I know what I know now. And I think the thing with me, Nick, I'm constantly learning, and I'm learning now how, and I'm really like to see people like yourself, and others, a younger generation coming through as entrepreneurs and just going for it. I know how hard it is to grow something. When you're in a big company, you don't realize, you see all these small SMEs and people starting out, you don't realize how difficult it is. And it is tough. So I think your main point is, anyone out there listening, that whether you're young or old, you get the opportunity, just go for it. There's always go back on what you did before.
I think some great advice, Dean. I think to that point, because I know the work that goes into sort of launching a business, as do many of the people I've had on the show, and we've talked about a lot. I'd love to just hold on sort of how you approach those early days. Did you have clarity on the business you want to build? Did you have a sort of business plan that you'd written down in detail and then, it was executing it? Or was it, you had an idea and you spent some time thinking about it before you went to market? How did you approach sort of those early days to get the business off the ground? Because again, if I'm trying to put myself in some of my listeners' shoes, I'm sure they're probably thinking, oh, well, this sounds great, but I've still got to put the kids to bed. I've still got to, take the kids to rugby. And you obviously did all of that while creating the business. So I'd love to just hear those early days, how you got to the point where you could go out on your own and, start achieving the growth you did.
Yeah, and I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that there was a lack of small to medium consultancy businesses, particularly in a secure environment in government. Most of the good ones have been bought. So I knew there was a gap in the market. I knew the end goal where I wanted to do. I knew people that would come and join and would want to share in the growth and success. So it was really a case of looking around for an investor that, I was willing to invest, but, was happy to invest as well. Luckily I found one, and he'd already spotted a very small learning and development business that taught accredited training really around, but lots of training that a consultant would use, so change management, etc. So we got chatting, and he showed me the business. He said, could you build a consultancy business around this? What do you think? I said, yeah. I said, that'll be perfect. I can start with the L&D and then grow around it. And that's what we did. So we bought a very small and not very profitable, it was a training business at the time. And then really that was the start of the journey. I could see, so I built the business plan, the 5-year business plan around that and how we would grow that, but also how we would take on consultancy. And you're probably speaking before, I'm a real big believer in learning, throughout, both not only accredited learning, but mentoring and coaching, reading, podcasts, learning. We all learn. I learn every day. We all need to learn. So starting off with L&D was a great thing for consulting. And at IMD, that's one of our main differentiators really, is that not only do we work with our clients and help them with their secure digital transformation, cyber safe digital transformations, but we upskill and we work with their staff to get our clients ready to take on those new changes. So yeah, I was lucky to meet, to find an investor. And then I said, remortgaged my house, invested in the training business, and then off we went.
Yeah, I'm curious how you decided that's the right business. And I only ask, probably just putting my own thoughts on this, Dean, is part of me would always wonder, could I just go and start the same thing and do it better? But, obviously it's paid off for you. Sort of how did you see that this was the catalyst for you? You mentioned it wasn't a profitable business as such. That initially would make me think, well, why not just go and make a profitable business without any of that legacy? What was that sort of diamond in the rough that, you and your investors saw and thought, actually, we could turn this into something?
Yes, it's a great question, and it was quite. There's quite a few golden nuggets in the business. I think the first thing to say is that 95% of the business was in one market, and that market was armed services resettlement. So when those that serve for the country come out of the Army, Navy, or Air Force, they get some money from the government to retrain, and it's their part of their transition to civilian life. And the training business that we purchased had a great track record of doing that, but that was it. So first thing for me was, well, hang on, the capability of the business is there, but there's no sales and marketing. And how about Bristol? It was based in Bristol, buzzing city, Hargreaves Lansdowne, computer share, you name it, what a city, but no business with the city. So number one for me was, I'm sales led. Can I sell the services that this training company is offering? The answer was yes. Can I sell more? Yes. That was the first thing. It also needed taking. Marketing was pretty poor. The website had cost £400 and looked as though it came from the 70s. And the previous owner, was a really clever guy, and his business partner, they were great. So the capability was fantastic, but he was heading towards the 70s and would admit he didn't know how to sell and take it further. So I think on the growing of the training business, the first thing is that it was tired, but it had good capability that I could sell elsewhere in Bristol. And then the major thing that got me excited was that I had all these great service leaders coming out of of their service career with the relevant clearances, the skill set, the experience to go and work in consulting. What they needed was the training. So it was quite an easy buy, really. I looked at it and thought, well, I can take these great guys and girls, teach them how to do, project management, change management, but also how to work in Civvy Street, and then get them into the business and then grow a consultancy business around it. And that's exactly what I did. And it's been a great journey, and I've been lucky to see and look at lots of armed service leaders that have come through the organisation.
I think there's some really powerful points there, Dean, particularly for anyone listening who's thinking of something similar. I guess then you mentioned, and I'd love to dive in a bit more to the journey you've been on, because you've had phenomenal growth, and with that I'm sure has come a lot of learnings, a lot of things you might do differently if you were to do it again, or maybe you'll do differently onto the, when you double the business over the next few years. But, you mentioned there that you started as a pure play training business and very quickly moved into consulting. You mentioned your investor. You also talked sort of before about the private equity side. You've had a lot go on in the last few years, and I'd love to just get your reflections. Looking back, sort of what's been those key learnings for you from some of those pivotal moments building the business?
Yeah, I think there's probably two main ones, really, Nick, and I'll talk about the first one, which is quite close to my heart, really, which is around talent development. I'm a firm believer in growing talent within a business, and one of the things that really gets me out of bed in the morning and jumping around like Tigger is seeing people within the company grow and develop in their careers. And I always say to people when they join us, I make an effort to speak to everybody when they first join is, what do you want to do while you're with us? Where do you want to go? And I always say to them, look, whether you're with us for 20 years, 20 months or 20 weeks or 20 days, I want you to learn while you're with us, because that's what it's all about. It's about empowering people and helping people to develop and learn. So early on, we set the consulting business up in 2016 after buying the learn development business in 2015. 2017, we took some grads on and what I would call second job graduates, and they left. Yeah, we failed basically, and I failed. And the reason was that we just weren't ready. We're too immature as a business, and I let my enthusiasm for, the culture, what I wanted in the business, probably go too far, and I brought the youngsters in too early. And we were so flat out delivering that the seniors in the business just didn't have time to mentor and coach. So big mistake, and one that, I still feel very bad about. And those people have gone off. We did train them up, have gone off and done great things, and I'm still in contact. But I wanted them to be with us as we grew into the bigger company I knew we'd become. So I learned that was one of my biggest mistakes, really. So really think through, sometimes you let your passion for the future of the business maybe come in too early. Subsequently, what we did, we then moved to a different hiring. We hired more senior consultants. And then lo and behold, within a couple of years, we're back, particularly now, really got a academy in place and a good structure in place to train our junior consultants, and that will increase. So yeah, I think just be a little bit careful. You're not too over enthusiastic in your beliefs, if that makes sense. Maybe that's the right word. And secondly, probably know your business partners, the investor who I luckily met, and really I wouldn't have started without them. A very, very successful businessman in his own right. But we're from different industries, and I think, that made things more difficult along the journey. But we built a successful business, and when we eventually got new investors in under the management buyout with private equity, we spoke to 20 different private equity companies, all were interested. So, yeah, that was probably the other thing, really. So really understand who you're starting off with, and just make sure you got same exit plans, the same growth plans, and you understand. I was probably quite naive at the time, very enthusiastic. I know I could do it, but I think in retrospectively, it's worthwhile thinking about, who you team with. But as I said, we've been a great success, and without the original investment, we wouldn't be where we are now.
If I'm honest, I want to dig into all of those things. But I think one thing, you mentioned around having that investment and that partner, and I think partnership's fascinating in consulting because it can be the make or break of consulting firms. I actually interestingly had Joe O'Mahony. He's a professor in management consulting, and he actually has done some research, and the number one reason for both success and failure is picking the right partner. The ones that work have gone stratospheric, some that didn't have led to businesses failing. And you mentioned around sort of your journey with your business partner and then the buyout. But for anyone now listening, with that hindsight, almost if someone came to you and said, well, Dean, what are some of those things I should be making sure of? I'm keen to go into business with someone. What are some of the things that almost you'd recommend they ask and find out to make sure it is going to be a fit for them, and anything that they should be addressing early to make sure that, things don't come back to bite them further down the line?
Yeah, I think the key thing for me is that, as I mentioned earlier, is around exit. When do you want to exit? I think the next thing is shared vision. What is your vision for the business, and do you really share that? Personally, I think it helps if you're both from similar industries or industries that link. I think that, different industries, quite rightly, need a different type of person and are organised different. So, a service company as opposed to a manufacturing company, they are different beasts. I think that's the main thing. And, making sure that you both understand where you want to go, I think is the key thing. And with the first investor, I knew that he wanted to, exit, and that worked out very well.
Fantastic. There's some really good advice. You made the point that actually when you were doing the management buyout, you spoke to 20 private equity firms, and you spoke to 20 and picked one. What is it that people should look for in that private equity partner? Is it the same as what you just highlighted about a business partner? Or if it's different, what is it that you should be focusing on?
Yeah, I think that it took us about a year, which is a long time to find the right organisation. We spoke to a few, and we picked quite a small, Chiltern Capital, quite small then, but fast growing. And for me, it was they really believed in. By then, I had another business partner who invested, and they wanted to invest in both of us. That was pretty clear. They had backgrounds in L&D and in consulting, so really understood that. And they weren't like, you get this myth, you get this, everybody said to me, private equity and it's a nightmare. They just weren't. They're sensible people. Their expectations weren't absolutely silly. And I could tell they were going to add value, and the journey, has been amazing. They add massive value. And things that I thought, why do I need to do that? I've needed to do it. They have been superb. And as a board, we function really well with them on the board. I listen to their advice. They listen to my advice. I've got a great chairman who I knew before, but they supported me in bringing in. Yeah, it's been a real game changer. And for me, you pick the right private equity. So somebody that wants to come along with you on the journey, is willing to invest, and you're aligned in your views, and they understand your industry. That's what I look for.
One thing I was keen to touch on, because I know we've spoken a little bit before, and you mentioned there about developing a strong culture, is really actually how you approach leadership. Because again, sort of there's lots of different philosophies and thoughts on this, but I know you've talked before about sort of the power of servant leadership, and that's how you like to lead. I'd love for anyone who hasn't heard that term before, I'd love to just hear what that means to you, and how then that actually manifests in the business, and ultimately what results you see from it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, really, Nick. I've never really heard of servant leadership until about 6 months ago when I listened to a podcast from a client. But I listened to it and thought, that's me. That's what we do. So yeah, it's quite new to me, and I've read some books on it as well. So it's all about empowering your colleagues and sort of uplifting them, to giving them the space, giving them the opportunity to really grow, and rather than commanding, it's sort of lots of empathy, not brandishing your authority because you're the boss. It's really making sure that they come first. So all of the things I mentioned earlier around, I'm interested in how people grow when they join us. That's real. And I was doing all that before I read about servant leadership. Equally, the two executives on the board, they're exactly the same. My FD and my COO. So, what it does, it sort of unlocks potential, unlocks creativity. So that's the sort of general overview of what it is, and how do we implement it in IMD Group? Everybody has a voice, so no one is belittled. So I don't want, you do not want to stifle initiatives or innovation by, what it's like. You may have been in a situation at school or at college or even at work where you want to say something, but you're terrified of saying it because somebody's going to jump down your throat or you're going to look a wally. No, I think in our business, it's very much speak, please speak. No one is going to put anybody down. It never happened. If they did, that's a complete no for me. So make it clear from juniors to everybody, please say, I want you to build your confidence. I want you to say what you feel. It's very important. So I think that sort of transparency and openness, everybody's ideas are listened to. And if they're not right, we'll say we don't quite think that's right because of X, Y, Z. I'm also very keen on open business planning. So where are we going to take the business in 5 years? This is where I think we need to take it. But what do you think? Junior consultant, what do you think? Is this the right thing to do? Where is digital transformation going? What's next? So everybody gets a voice. The other thing for me as well is that as you grow particularly into a CEO role, you do everything at the start when you're starting up, as you well know, Nick. But then you soon realise that you don't know everything and you can't do things as well as others can. So bring people in, empower them to do them. Help them, motivate them, give them that passion to grow in their careers, and then trust them to get on with it. So that's really what it's all about for me. And the direction is set in the business planning, but everybody in the business has been involved in that. They're bought into that.
How do you go about that, Dean? Because you made the point quite rightly. When you're a business of our size, I sit in the room with my team, so I can role model that, and we can talk about it as a team, and that's everyone included. Obviously, when you're sort of, I think you said 160, you can be a role model in that they see you, but you can't sort of speak to everyone as the CEO. How have you put those structures in place to do exactly that, to get the buy-in and make sure that everyone feels that sort of approach that you want and you've described?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is what a lot of businesses fail on is it's communication. So things like weekly, we have a TFIF Friday meeting. It's where we just go around 30 seconds, everybody's available on the call, good thing in the week, bad thing in the week, and what you did in the weekend. So I think that then shows the sort of humility that, we're open, we have a little bit of humour, etc. So that's sort of a weekly. I'm really keen on a quarterly review meeting. It's a really good thing that I picked up from my time at BMT, where you take everybody off fees, everybody, and it's a 3-line whip really. Please tell your clients you can. Client comes first, but we want you either at a venue or in the office, or at the moment, obviously online. But really, a little bit in the morning about the business, and so in that we would talk about business planning and what it means. We would have workshops on are we doing the right things, and then in the afternoon we usually have a bit of fun. We did some graffiti with some artists in Bristol. We've done cooking. We've had magicians. We've done various things. So there's always a bit about the business in the morning, workshops, etc., and then a bit of fun in the afternoon. So we use that sort of event to get the overall message over. During the business planning process, the senior leadership team, the level below, the execs are involved and have their say. And then I run a load. They then, speak to their sort of reportees and teams and explain. And then I run a sort of couple of lunch and learn sessions where we go over what we're planning to do, take feedback, and add that in before we go to the board to the non-execs and investors with what we're planning to do. So it's down to communication, Nick. It really is, and because people feel engaged, people want to share that success. They want to be part of what you're planning to do. So all of this has led to good camaraderie, good team spirit. We all work for each other. Productivity's increased. But productivity is increased because of the happiness of empowerment of the team. I mean, to me, it just makes sense. Letting people grow and we all got to go to work. Letting people grow and enjoy what they their time whilst they're working. Yeah, that's the sort of way that we do it. And I'm very lucky. I've got a brilliant group of people that work alongside me that really help, and they believe in servant leadership, and they believe in trying to get the best out of people by giving them the opportunity to grow. I think we're very good at that. And interestingly, I had just come out with a staff engagement survey, and it says that pretty clear, really. So
I think, like you say, that communication piece, and when you boil it down, it sounds simple, but actually it's the sort of stuff that's simple to do, but also simple to forget, isn't it? Particularly right now when we're all at home, we're all busy, and I don't know about you. I feel the world has accelerated with COVID. I feel I'm in more meetings and Zoom calls now than ever, and I'm sure I think every client says the same. But at those times, it's very easy to let this slip. And like you say, just focusing on those details, those quarterlies, and being open obviously has rewarded you and gives you that culture that the sort of staff surveys confirm, which is great to hear, Dean.
On the COVID piece, really, I think the other thing we're really, really big on is mental health, and we're pretty open in the business that that reach out particularly to those that during COVID have been on their own. Lots of initiatives around one person a week you get team with to catch up with, and again the sort of Friday meeting helps. We have quizzes and all those sort of things, but they're keeping in contact. The guys and girls are coming out with some great initiatives on the call on a Friday. You usually have to do a challenge that you come with. It's a picture of a famous painting made out of food, or there's just various things that are quite hilarious.
I love that.
That's been really good fun. And then we've just been set a around the world in 6 weeks initiative by a triathlete in the business that wants us all to exercise more, record it on Strava, and go around the world in 6 weeks. So that kicked off yesterday. Sorry, left today. And we'll see how we get on. So, yeah.
I love things like that. It's, I think those challenges just bring everyone together. This sort of stuff works, but I think you're spot on. The hardest thing right now, and the thing that isn't getting the press, is that mental health. And a lot of us, myself included, and it sounds like you as well, get a lot from being in the office, being with people. I don't think as a species we were designed to sit in our spare rooms or our studies, or, and you and I are the lucky ones. We have, I'm looking at your study, you're looking at mine. For your junior team members and any juniors listening, being in a shared house in London or Bristol, working on I've heard people working on sort of ironing boards. That's not a long-term approach. And anything you can do to boost that sort of positivity and mental health, I think is critical at this time. It wasn't necessarily the segue I was planning on, but does kind of take us there, just because I was keen to, as part of that leadership piece, something you and I have talked a lot about before is sports. Obviously, you run a rugby team. You've tried your very best to get me to come down. I may still do when all this is over. I don't know, Dean, if my rugby days are over. So every time I played has sort of hurt more and more. I'm edging closer to 40 than 20, so I don't know if there's a time limit on it. But I just love to get your take around sort of how those two elements come together for you, because I know that you see a lot of you've put a lot, to your point, about podcasts and reading. You've done a lot of learning on the sports side and sports management. And actually, what are some of those key things that you've taken from your time in sport, both playing and now managing a team, and actually brought into business that you found really had that positive impact?
Yeah, great question. And it's a passionate subject of mine. It's something I found very interesting. But first of all, Nick, what size boot are you? Because I'm sure I can. And 6'4", however tall you are, you could definitely do well in the rugby team.
We'll take that off air, Dean, because I'm sure over a drink, I'm sure you can try and persuade me.
There's many advantages on. The obvious ones are physical and mental health. The basics of doing sport. And I've always said to my children, I've always encouraged them to do sport, because probably like you, Nick, and like me, wherever I've been in the country, I pop along to the rugby club and there are a pair of boots turn up for you. So, whether it's hockey, whether it's tennis, if you play sport, you immediately got a network, which is fantastic. So I think, what have I taken from sport, participating and latterly coaching, that in business, I think a lot of it is around leadership. My way of coaching is very much around positivity, enthusiasm, getting people to really feel positive about what they're about to do. And I think positivity, the mental strength gets you through some games when you think you're going to lose. So I bring that into the business. I'm lucky I'm quite enthusiastic as a person anyway, but that passion, and particularly when I'm speaking to other CEOs or doing podcasts like this, or speaking to the team, it's enthusiasm. I'm just enthusiastic. You have to be. So that's probably one thing, is enthusiasm, drive, motivation. Other things, the ability to listen. At half time when you're speaking to the players, or listening, and you haven't got very long to listen, so you have to listen, no matter how much you want to talk. I think that's another thing that I brought into the business, is listening skills, as everybody says, just like communication is key, but it is, and you can miss things. I think clear direction, again, when you haven't got, thinking on your feet, when you haven't got time, when you're playing rugby as captain, or you're coaching, it's, decision making's got to be pretty quick and clear direction. Not muffled direction, clear at times, particularly, look at COVID, when we've had to give clear direction. Other things I've learned, I think, from sport, learning to take the loss. We all get disappointed when we lose. It's taken that loss, and I think I've learned a lot of that from rugby, and doing that into the business. You may have worked so hard on a bid or a tender, you lose it, you're absolutely disappointed, but learn from it and learn to take it. I think determination. Sport's competitive. Okay, maybe not at grassroots level where I always played, but it's still competitive, and I think that's good to have in the business. But I think most of all for me, it's that team spirit, that one goal, that camaraderie, that whole thing about we're in this together. That's what's big for me, and I think that's what comes down to the sort of link to servant leadership, is that, come on, I might be the CEO, but we're in this together, and I need you, to help me get to where we want to go. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. I think things that probably are good with sport that you can take into business: relationship building. Again, I said that's key to selling, key to consulting, that want to improve. One thing, funny enough, I've just really thought about over the last few weeks, really, is learning to adapt. You plan all week for a great training session where, you're going to teach the guys how to play off Owen Farrell, and it's going to be great. And then 7 turn up for training. So you expected 20, you got 7. So you're there. It's a cold Tuesday night in Bath. It's about to snow. The guys don't really want to be there, but they are. It's getting them motivated, but turning it around and then doing something on the hoof really is, sorry guys, this is what I was going to do this, but actually now we're doing this, and it's getting them motivated to, that happens a lot. And I think it's the same in business. You expect something, then you've got to adapt sometimes really quickly, and having the calmness and the thought and mindfulness of thinking a deep breath, right, think and go, I think is something else that sports taught me.
I think some great points there, Dean. And I agree with all of them, having played what I'd call grassroots rugby as well. I've been at those training sessions when you've got 7 and expected 20, or there's probably been a few where you've got 3. You all look at each other and say, "Let's just go home, lads." But that adaptability point, I think, like you said, in business has obviously served you very well, and that camaraderie piece, I think, is so often forgotten. You mentioned how you're doing that at IMD, and actually how you build that feeling of team, because I guess sort of implicit in your point is team sport is on and off the field. The great thing, we've talked about with rugby is you don't just play it to play the game, particularly at grassroots level. No one goes just to play the game, but it's that off the field as well, making friends. And I think what you're saying is, that's the same at work. You've got to do your job. Everyone's got to work, but actually that should be more than just people you go and work with and you don't know about. You want to know about their lives because they're part of yours. And that's what builds that, that camaraderie, isn't it?
Correct. And, pre-COVID, in fact, during COVID, we have a summer barbecue where everybody brings their families. We play rounders. We had the magician. We've done that every year. We always have a Christmas party. And throughout the year, we have various events. So, yeah, and that's what, and, before we moved office in Bristol, we were on King Street, near King Street. So we were straight out on a Friday. And, yeah, I like to, let your hair down and outside of work and build that relationship with everybody. It's key.
And a slight tangent, but I think equally important for any consultant, because I think, our career is renowned for quite long work hours. It's quite intense, particularly for people who are traveling. They can be, away from home quite a lot. But even if you're not, it can be quite long hours. I think something that sticks out for me, given everything you've talked about, is, we joked about it, but you run a rugby team. And for anyone listening who's played sports, they'll know what goes into that. But for anyone who hasn't, that's actually quite a lot of work. Like you said, turning up at training, games, organising, it's almost a job outside of a job. I'd love to just find out, what is it that makes that so important to you that you've decided to keep it going? Because I'm sure there's some people listening who say, "Oh, I gave up sport because work got too busy," or I didn't take up the kids' sports club or whatever it was. Why did you decide, while you're growing IMD and continue to, why have you kept that? And why is it important to you to, have that team, I guess, outside of work?
Yeah, I think firstly, I'm very lucky in that I cannot claim any credit for anything but coaching. The committee at the club is second to none, and I just coach they do everything else. So I think that helps. But no, I think, I've committed to the, it's my fourth season with them. I've committed to them. It's a commitment. I've committed to be there. So I really like the guys I coach. They're really good people. And again, for me, it's watching people develop. And we had some players that had not played, they were in their 30s, not played since school. We had players that never played rugby before. So I think that's the good bit of coaching. Yeah, it's nice to be at elite level and, spin pass and score loads of tries. But for me, it's seeing, and we like to win, of course we do, but it's developing. So that whole developing and helping people thing, I think is the main thing for me. I've made a commitment. I'm lucky to have another coach that works alongside me, and on the occasion I can't make it through business, if I'm in London or a meeting runs on, then he's always stepped in. But it's the commitment that I've made, and it's an escape. It's an escape from work, and I completely shut off. And that's, as we all know, that's so important with sort of mental health. And I'm doing something that I really enjoy, and I'm still learning. I look at podcasts on various and videos on various sort of rugby drills on the train. When I have some spare time, discuss it with my son, who's a keen rugby player, and he's played some good rugby, and he tells me how he gets coached at uni. So yeah, I think it's the loyalty to the team, the camaraderie, escape, fresh air, cold fresh air, rainy fresh air on a pitch that's sodden wet and you're muddy. That's what it's all about, Nick.
I do, Dean, and it's in part why it might be a little while till you get me out. But I think that point around escape, for anyone listening, I think is really powerful. And part of what you've said there as well of the, you've made that commitment. I think something that, I know I've suffered from in the past is if I've said to myself, I'll go to the gym or I'll do a run or, I'll promise to me, it's very easy for, the project to overrun, the call to overrun, and suddenly it's whatever time and you can't. Whereas if you've got, like you said, 20 or 7, but hopefully 20 guys waiting for you, you've got that commitment that, you've promised. And actually, I think for anyone listening, that's probably a really good bit of advice is, if you're trying to get an escape from work and a hobby, is almost commit to some people, join a club. It doesn't have to be rugby. It could be a different sport or a different activity, but commit to that because you're more likely to do it than if you sort of just promise yourself that you'll read a book in the evening. That's much more likely to fall away.
Absolutely, Nick. And I think the other thing as well, I've failed in the past, is make the time. So, I'll make sure that I'll try not to be in London on a Tuesday. Obviously, sometimes you can't change it, or when we train. Or, I'll make sure I've got, at least I know I'm going to finish at 5 rather than at 6 and then straight off to training. So, but it's difficult, we all have, and then people have got families to deal with, it's tough, but, it's so important to, particularly around the mental health that I mentioned earlier, it's very easy to get so ingrained in your work, start missing out on those things, get more stressed. It's just a vicious circle. Then you stop doing things, and next thing you know, you're working all the hours, and you go, and that's it. So many people have done that, and I think we all have to look out for our family, friends, and colleagues to, just to be a bit careful on that front. Sport is good if you like sport.
Well, and if you don't, there's plenty of other activities, team activities available. You could run a book club. It's I guess, like you say, it's the commitment. You and I like rugby, and like you say, the running around muddy fields, it's not for everyone, but that key point, and I've shared on this podcast before, one of the reasons I left being a consultant was probably that burnout from pushing myself too hard, because in our industry it's very easy to it's easy to say, oh well, I'll just move a little faster to the next grade or get a pay rise or promotion, and actually you realize your life's long and that's not the way to get to where you want. Taking some time out, do something like you say you enjoy, play some sport or whatever else your hobby is a really powerful point. And the great thing about the era we live in now is that mental health has really come to the fore. And I think, people like yourself championing it's really powerful, Dean. So really key point. I want to turn to something you touched on quite a way back in our conversation, but is a key theme for you and your business around that point around helping people learn and develop and, the focus on L&D. And again, I'm thinking for other consulting leaders or consultants listening to this, but maybe we start with the sort of consulting entrepreneurs like yourself or partners in sort of larger firms, is you see it as key to success. But I think in some parts of our industry, there's a bit of a skepticism about L&D. And in part, it's well, if I invest in your training, I've spent thousands of pounds and you could just run next door and, I've lost that investment. I'd love to hear, given it's such a core part of your business and something I'm sure you share, you talk to clients about day in, day out. What's your advice for anyone who's, on the fence about whether they should be investing in L&D? What are some of those key benefits that you've seen, your clients have seen, and are really what people should be focusing on when thinking about actually where to prioritize that money towards L&D?
Yeah, it's understandable, particularly in the current climate, that people are looking at cutting. They've got to survive really, and cut the budgets around training and learning development. But I think I'll start when people automatically think of training as being a week's Prince 2 course or a course. That's one part of training. We use the 70-20-10 model of learning in the business. So your 10% of learning is that accredited or learning, 20% is social learning, so mentoring and coaching, and then 70% is on-the-job training. So, on-the-job training, that's the way I've always learned better than sitting down face-to-face, listening to somebody. So I think it's how you look at training. And yes, you need time off, but there's nothing better than learning from somebody senior. And I think as consulting, that's what you need to focus on. Yes, you can teach the methodologies, you can teach best practice, and that's important too. And mentoring, having somebody senior you can go and speak to, how do I deal with this difficult client, knowing a good buddy or a good senior, those sort of things don't cost money. It's just good practice. It's making people feel empowered, making people feel safe in their environment, then they're not in somewhere where they're doing something wrong. They can reach out. So I think anybody that's thinking about it, on that side, is it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge, financial investment. I think is the key thing. I think one thing COVID's brought is training will probably get a bit cheaper. It can be done online, whether that's digital learning, but also virtual learning, on Zoom. So there's no travel, there's no TNS. But yeah, I think, however, I am an advocate of that sort of 10% of learning to get the best practice. You have to, if you don't give your team the training and the development, they're going to go. So they're going to go, and that's that. At least explain to them that if you haven't got the money, look, the budget's not there this year, but we're going to do some mentoring and coaching with you. Just let them know what goes on. But if you don't invest in your staff, they'll go, I've seen it. We've had people come to us for that. We're lucky to have a learning development business in the group. But one of the reasons people let a companies that they let a lie. They're told that they're going to be invested in, and they're not. So I think that, there are things, why people leave as well. Though, it's not only L&D in isolation, but I think it also breeds happiness. It breeds a way of engaging with others. We have internal, blogs on certain subjects where people can ask questions. So yeah, and I think I found a quote. I found the famous Richard Branson one, and I'm going to read it out, Nick. So because I couldn't remember.
Go for it, Dean.
But it's train people well enough so they can leave. Treat them well enough so they don't want to. So I think that's really good. So it's not only about the training, but it's also treating them with that sort of empowerment. No, there's no point going and do a course, do the week's course, have a few good beers in the evenings with your course colleagues, network. That's really good. Learn Prince 2 or change management. Come back and put it on the shelf. No. When you come back, you need to be speaking to your team leader. What did you learn? How can I improve my client work? And speak to your client and get, it's just the right thing to do. And we're all learning. We learn every day. So yeah, that's my answer. Do it.
And I love the Richard Branson quote, Dean, to your point, that I guess it ties with what you're saying about that servant leadership is you need to create that environment where people want to stay and actually then you want the best for your business and your clients. And the way to do that is by training them the best. And like that quote says, you shouldn't be asking about what if they'll leave because of training. There's going to be other reasons that they're likely to leave. It's interesting what you say there, though, and I love the sort of 70-20-10 model because, I'm sure people listening to this were probably going to expect you to say, well, as someone who runs an L&D business, it's 70% formal training and the other way around. But I think what you're saying there is really powerful. And I guess, you mentioned it just at the end there. Take whichever one first. For someone who's running a business, be it a partner in a consulting firm, be it someone like yourself leading the business, what should they be thinking about to create those opportunities for on-the-job training? But equally, for any consultants listening, any of those sort of people who are making their way up the ladder, they're more junior, actually, what should they be doing to create those opportunities?
Yeah, I think if you come back to the to the whole ethos of the business, really, 90% of our business is consulting and advising clients around digital transformation. But the 10% is a very, very important 10%, both with our clients and internally. With our clients, it's doing that change, but upskilling them so they know what to do. And that upskilling may be a bit of formal training, but also the coaching and mentoring. And going back to your question with people how do you set up the, what to do? Well, with your client, a lot of clients are, you've got to speak to the client, but I like, when you've got a contract with a client that you know and trust, bring in the junior alongside the senior to do, start off doing the probably quite simple, writing the reports, finding data, doing the research. That's the way that we do it. Have them alongside, almost like it's like an apprenticeship, really, isn't it? Having them alongside you, getting them to do tasks, empowering them to do more and more over a period of time until they become in that position that they can, deliver small client assignments on their own or in support of you. Does that make sense to answer your sort of question? And I think as an individual, ask for it. There are various elements to consulting. If you feel as though as an individual deficient in a certain area, then ask. I want to learn about marketing. Can I have, half a day off fees to go internal to the business and look at marketing? I think as long as there's a good reason for it, for a business reason, as an individual, that's what I'd be asking. Can I shadow the sales team? Can I look at what finance do? Can I go and work with a consultant that's a cyber expert to learn a bit about cyber before I decide to go in there? So that's what I would do if I was a consultant. Demand it, Nick.
Well, and I think it's a great point, Dean, because, at my old consultancy, you got given training points and you spent them on training courses. That wasn't all that was offered, it's worth saying. But I think a lot of people think of L&D in that way. It's your Prince 2. Every consultant's Prince 2 qualified. But actually, the places I learned the most are what you said. It's that on the job, I'm going to go and shadow so-and-so, or I'm going to watch them, because a lot of what you do and what I know people like us do, it's the stuff you do in the room. It's the thought process. It's the things that you need to see being done. I guess it's a bit like your sports analogy is you could go to a training course to learn how to play rugby, but it's much easier going and standing with someone who's playing, watching a game, taking part. That's the way you learn the sport. And, it's the same, works just a sport with different rules as far as I'm concerned.
Correct. And I think that, the accredited training should really just be so you understand the leading edge techniques, but really just to make you understand that what you're doing is right. And the right words, and it does give you the right buzzwords and right things and etc. But you got to listen to others, so social learning, mentoring, being coached, and then do it on the job. That is the best way and the fastest way to learn.
Yeah, completely agree, Dean. One of the last things I was keen to touch on, because again, something that you obviously said was the start of your success and still a core part of your business, is around that military leavers and sort of getting them ready for civvy streets. And I've had friends from school who have made that transition. Again, I've not been in the military, so this is all secondhand. But I do understand for some it can be quite a challenge, because the skill set you're trained in the military, while it has a lot to transfer, is not on CV what's necessarily immediately, obviously, a skill you can use in civilian life. But for someone who's trained countless military leavers, this is a core part of your business. You've seen that success for them. I'd love to hear your advice for those people. For anyone listening to this who maybe is about to leave the military and let's say they're thinking of consulting, what should they be thinking about really to help them set themselves up for that next phase of life?
I think it's fantastic now that with having quite a few MPs in the government that are ex-services that deserve support, that the guys and girls that do what they do for us, they're finally getting it. I've seen the transformation in veterans and the help for them. There's still a long way to go. It's been brilliant, and they deserve it. Absolutely. And I think it's good. I think also UK PLC is suddenly realising at last they're really good. Gone are the days when, they think they're Windsor Davis with a stick under their arm and shouting. No, these guys and girls are absolutely savvy. So I think, what I say to, what I reach out and what I always say to them is, country needs you guys. UK PLC needs you. Why do they need you? You're well trained, you turn up on time, you know how to work under pressure, and the skills you've got, no matter what branch of the services you're in, what trade you are, or where you work, those skills are transferable. And I think that's the biggest problem, when speaking to people in resettlement over the last, 5 years since I've been involved in this business, but previously people I've met through work and elsewhere, it's really, tying up what they're getting away from that military speak and converting it to city street, really, Nick. And learning that the words that X, that's what you put on your CV, things you don't put on your CV, how to use LinkedIn. They get some help from, career transition partnership. But the sort of key thing for me really is you're needed and wanted. And a lot more companies get that now and are reaching out, but a lot more could do it. So I think the continual push for the Armed Service Covenant, yeah. And I think how can those people, get what are the things they need to do? Network, speak to a former military colleague that's resettled before you, has gone out, speak to them. They will tell you how it happened for them. They will give you advice. They will say, go and have a coffee with Nick. You're going to have a coffee with Nick and Nick tells you about marketing. You realise you like marketing. Nick knows somebody that needs somebody in marketing. So, it's the whole military network is huge. And the guys, like Ben, you mentioned, drop of a hat, they'll give you advice and help. And that armed service family, is whatever trade and background, whatever rank you are, is there for you and use it. And I've seen, brilliant people come through the Learning and Development Centre. Equally, I've met brilliant people that have got second careers or careers in Civvy Street. So please use all the advice you can get. Speak to people speak to family and friends. Those are the sort of things that your skills are transferable.
I think, a great message there, Dean. And some really powerful points, both in terms of the, that overarching points of you are valuable, and also, the practical pieces of actually a lot of it just comes down to the words you use, not the skills you have, the difference in language. I guess thinking of that side of actually that how valuable those skills and those people are, for anyone who is listening, who is running a consulting firm, what should they be thinking about? How can they do more to help our former servicemen and women and help them sort of come into consulting and actually for their own businesses, get the benefit of those people's skills and experience?
Well, employ them is obviously the major answer now. I think obviously depending on the size of business, but have open days, invite people to come and work alongside you, offer them work experience, go out and present to them, whether it's through the Officers Association or whether it's through the Career Transition Partnership. Talk to them about what you do and the skill sets you need. Sit down with somebody who may be working in logistics in the in the armed services, and you run a logistics business. Sit down with somebody and say, well, what do you do? This is what we do. And you'll realise that they match. There are some people that are more ready than others. Some people have been so used to being looked after in the within the armed services, they find the transition quite difficult. But there's a lot of help around to help them. And I reach out to those people and say, please, speak to colleagues. That's the main thing. So give them an opportunity. Everybody I've met, it's amazing. I know. Let's think of one example. We had one guy on one of our training course, 3 weeks course. Really, it's a mini MBA, and I sat and talked to him about Civvy Street, and he was clearly in the army, Royal Signals. He was a warrant officer. He came back a year later and did a presentation to people that were going through the same course within our management centre, and he stood up there, and off he went. He was talking about BD and all these terms in Civvy Street, and all the guys are looking at him going, "What's BD mean?" It was just. The transformation was just, so there are a lot of great people out there. There are people that are setting up their own businesses. There are people like Ben Chapple that are setting up by themselves. You've got a lot there, and there's a lot there for you to give. And I do feel that UK PLC is getting better, but it could improve. So give the guys and girls the opportunity, explain to them what you do and help them. Some of them do need help out. But Officers Association, as I said, really good. Career Transition Partnership, there are others as well where we can help. If they're local to you, go and speak to the local regiment, get involved, speak to other people, other companies that have taken armed service personnel on. Those are things that I recommend.
I think some great advice, and like that example shows, Dean, a lot of it is giving people the opportunity. And yes, some companies may not be of the size or the scale to do it, but if you are, actually that training and a little bit of effort, I guess the same as you're saying, with junior members of the team, just that bit of effort goes a long way, and you reap a lot of rewards from it, and obviously do help out people who do need it in making that transition. So I think some great advice there. A last one, and this is sort of for a friend of a friend, should we say? It's not for myself. I guess I'd frame it for anyone who's listening who maybe they have kids who, I know sort of your son's gone to university, but others may have decided to go into the forces at that age. Is there actually anything that we've talked about, people coming out of the forces and how they transition at that stage? But for anyone who's thinking of entering the forces, or maybe anyone who's listening who sort of might be listening now, who's sort of in the forces, still serving, still in the thick of it, what can they be doing earlier in their career to help them prepare for Civvy Street? Are there any things that you tell, or the sort of the people coming through your course say, I wish I'd done that when I was 21, 22? What should those sort of young servicemen and women be thinking to make that transition as easy as possible when the time comes?
Yeah, I think, the problem at a young age, you're not really clear what your future is. And, people may join up as a soldier, an aircraftman, and not really, and, not what they want to do. But I think before you go in, think about joining one of the trades, whether it's the sort of Royal Signals or Royal Engineers, or if you do want to, go in the infantry, then think about what career path that could give you afterwards. Because I would recommend, from my experience, I've never served, but all the people I've known, hundreds or thousands over the last, 30 years, it's a great, great, great career, and one I would really advocate. So I think before going in, think about, how can the armed services help me? What roles could I do? So I think that, and then while serving, they train you. So, get the qualifications that will help you get a job, on the other side. The Army often sponsors degrees whilst you're serving. They're brilliant at it now, the Army and Navy and the Air Force, of course, too. Take on those leadership roles where you can. That's so vital. Networking you're going to be, really, really good at. And then during your career, I think try and work in some of those roles, whether it's IT, whether it's medicine, whether it's business analysis, whether it's strategy, whether it's HR. Try and you can transfer between, different departments and different regiments. Try and get some of those roles that are used in Civvy Street. And I think one that most people forget is write a career history as you go along, and write down those things that you've done that are applicable to Civvy Street. But I think it's very difficult, with a youngster that, probably doesn't know, like all of us really, that, when we leave at 16 or whatever, we leave after university, what we really want to do. But I do honestly believe that the armed services are getting better, and they need to be. They need to be saying to people, come and join us. And I think the adverts on TV you see are sort of pointing to that. There's the excitement about travelling and the physical side of it and camaraderie. But yeah, I think both the armed services and the police can do a little bit more about mapping, to a career job. I think that would help. And, fire service and ambulance service, etc. That answer your question, Nick?
Yeah, I think it does, Dean. And I think some really powerful things there. And, for anyone who is thinking of going, and I'm sure that will help, Dean, definitely.
Yeah, I think one of the key things, I sort of missed off, it really frustrates me, is, we can't take he could go to public service as well as, armed services, is, well, you're public service, you don't understand commercials. Rubbish, we all go to the shop and buy stuff. We all watch the news. So, don't let anybody put you off joining a company. And I think, there are some roles in the military that perhaps you don't liaise with industry or, civilian life as much. But you do, and I think it's good to keep a track and push for roles where you do, work with industry and work alongside them and watch what they do. Equally, there's a great armed services career that you can completely do until you retire. So that's the other option, of course.
Dean, I'm conscious that we're sort of eating into Monday evening, and you've got a house full of family and things that I'm sure you need to attend to. I also don't want to keep you too late on the first day of the week. There's two last questions, and these are ones I like to ask all of my guests. And I know you've listened to a couple of other episodes. I'm sure you'll know what's coming. The first one is one about books, and you mentioned, you listen to a lot of podcasts, you've read a lot of, books on, say, servant leadership. And it's also worth saying, Dean, I say books, but it could be podcasts or videos as well. And I'd love to know, what is the book or books that you find yourself recommending or giving away most often to people, and why?
I don't enjoy a lot of business books. I buy them because they're hype, and I read the first few pages and think this is just rubbish. So that's my view on a lot of business books, but some are good, some aren't as good. I learn from experience. I get most of my personal views on the world, my business views from biographies or autobiographies. Everybody's got a different story to tell. That's what I find interesting. So, for me, it's reading, it's listening to podcasts on people, what they've done, how they've done it. That's what I find interesting, and equally talking to people, and it's probably one of my relationship building things that just happens. But, when I first met you, Nick, learning about your background, why you started your business, and you get little bits of information in there that you think, yes. So I would say any autobiography or any biography, because you're learning about people. It's not waffle. The latest business book is my view.
I love that, Dean. And I'm going to ask, just because I'm sure you've read a lot, are there any, take it the last year, however long, or any biographies or autobiographies that stick out for you? Any that you'd say, if you're going to start with one, this is the one you should read?
I think it's mine a lot of sport. I do like reading lots of sport ones. So if you're not sporty minded, then sorry, and particularly rugby players. So Martin Johnson, etc. I like politics. So a lot of people aren't fans, but I learned a lot from Margaret Thatcher's biography and autobiography. I'm sure I'll read Keir Starmer's and Jeremy Corbyn's. I think everybody's got a good story to tell, and there are things in there that you think, and it's life. That's the difference. It's not a theory that might become, and it might be a good theory. It's life experience, and I think that's where you need to learn from.
Fantastic, Dean. Well, and it's part of the reason we're here tonight for this podcast. Is I'm a big believer, like you, that actually you learn a lot from people's stories and people who are just slightly ahead of you on the journey, whatever that journey is, be it business, be it sport, be it sort of personal life. There's always something you can learn from everyone, and actually that having done it is a really powerful thing. So no, completely get that, and it's what we're doing here, albeit it's not written down. And then the very last question, and this again, maybe it is sort of distilling some of that advice or insights, particularly from your own journey, is you have three people in front of you, and you can give one piece of advice to each. The first person is someone who's a graduate, so maybe one of the graduates just starting at IMD. The second person is someone who's in, I say, the middle grades in consulting. So they're far enough into their career that they've got options, but they're not senior enough that they're sort of at the board table, if you like. And then the third person is someone who in that context is approaching the board. They're approaching partnership, they're approaching a director or a board director position. That's the next level for them. And as I say, the question is really, what one piece of advice would you give to each of them?
No, so it's a great question, Nick. I think it's probably more than one piece of advice. Knowing me, I'm sorry about that, but I'm not going to apologise. So I think with the starter, it's make sure you go into a company that's good, if you can, a company that's going to develop you. I think is the first thing. So just ask one of the questions to ask. What's the development for me? Because at that age, you do need to develop. Equally, you do not want to set yourself down one very narrow experience band. Look at all different things. I would say be patient. You're not going to be a millionaire next week. It ain't going to come quickly. It does to some, it does to others. I think also, other people's career will race ahead, and then yours goes ahead. And, that's the whole thing about it. Watch, listen, learn from others, network like mad, offer to take on responsibility. And I think the final one is be empathetic, because empathy is a good trait to have. So that's the, sorry, it wasn't one, Nick.
No, Dean, it's the more the better.
I think that's for somebody starting out. I think somebody 4 or 5 years in, my question to them would be, are you happy? Are you happy with what your current company is offering you? Are you happy with career? Are you learning? If not, move. If the company's not willing to look after you, move. Go for it. It's Organisations need to look after their staff, and if they don't, then people will move. So that's my view with those. And I think with a partner, it's similar, really. You've taken all this time, you've had a great career, but are you enjoying it at partner level? Is it what you expected? What's next? What's next after partner? Do you really want to sit back and, churn the handle and just keep going? Okay, get paid well and you deserve to be there because you're brilliant, but if you still got the hunger and want to do something else, go and do it. Go and do something else. Career's too short, life's too short. Just go and do it. Okay, you might earn a bit less, but come on, life is a learning journey. So keep learning, as I've said all the way throughout, Nick.
Well, Dean, I think that is a brilliant point for us to close on. So thank you very much for tonight. The only last thing to ask is for anyone who's listened to this, who wants to find out more about yourself or wants to find out more about IMD Group, where would you point them to? Where can they get in touch?
Yeah, obviously, find me on LinkedIn, Dean Taylor, IMD Group. The website, www.imd-group.co.uk. And those are the best ones. And then, you'll make contact with me on LinkedIn and I'll send you my email address. And I'm a busy guy, but I do try and speak to everybody I can. And I'm very, very happy to give advice because it's all about helping others. That's why we're here.
Fantastic, Dean. Well, I'll put in the show notes links to your website and LinkedIn so people can follow up with those. And yes, thank you. And I'm sure anyone who's listening who wants to will get in touch, and I'm sure you'll be able to share a lot with them. So thank you very much for today. I've really enjoyed finding out bits about the journey that I didn't know. As I say, shame we couldn't do it face to face, given only a few kilometers away, but we will do that. As soon as this lifts, Dean, we'll be at one of the your village pub or mine, and we'll be catching up properly. But as I say, Dean, thank you very much for today, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Oh, thank you, Nick. It's been great and lovely to speak to you. And I'm looking forward to that beer together.
Fantastic, Dean. Thanks a lot.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Climbing Consulting. If you have any guest recommendations, comments, ideas, thoughts on how I can make this show better for you, just drop me an email. It's nick@createengage.co.uk, and I really look forward to hearing from you.